Hello and welcome to The Rise with Sarah Cannell, the show that helps you break through to your next level in business and life from the inside out. Let's get ready to rise. I'm so thrilled you're here for our very first episode. And I I envision this with all the excitement and anticipation that I've had, my team has had to get to be here with you and bring this podcast to you. That this is a conversation. We're going to give it a whirl. We're going to dive in and talk today about what we mean by the rise. If we haven't had the opportunity of meeting, if I don't know you yet, I'm Sarah Cannell. I'm a 5 times bestselling author and the founder of Thought Leader Academy, where I have the incredible gift of working with coaches, experts, and entrepreneurs from all different niches and fields and industries, helping them become bestselling authors, in-demand speakers, so that they can change the world with their mission, their message, their movement. And all that is everything we do in Thought Leader Academy, everything that has taken me from someone who struggled every day with PTSD and trauma and feeling a disconnect between what I felt inside, the potential I felt, and what was happening outside, in the impact I was making in the world, in the people I was able to serve and support, in the income I was receiving and creating. There was such a disconnect between what Elizabeth Gilbert calls the big magic and what was actually happening on the outside. And I felt a lot of conflicting emotions about that. And I felt shame about that. And I felt powerless about that. And if that's something you've experienced, I want you to know you're absolutely in the right place. And when we think about when I have had the gift of coaching, working on myself for the past 25 plus years and coaching incredible leaders and experts and emerging thought leaders, everything that we do when we go from an idea to a next level, a vision of the next level to actually living that next level, is about a rise of some kind. The rise is internal, who we're becoming, our thoughts, beliefs, habits, identity. And the rise is external. What are the actions we take to lift ourselves and others with us to that next incredible transformation? So I'm really excited to have this ongoing dialogue with you, and especially these first 6 episodes in this series where we're going to talk about your rise. We're going to talk about the what it's going to take internally and externally for you to reach your next level in the coming 12 months and beyond. And we're going to do something that I've been craving from a podcast for a long time. So tell me if this excites you as much as it does me. When I think about these incredible thought leaders who've gone before us, right? If we think about who you name your favorite, whether it's Brene Brown or Mel Robbins or Tony Robbins or Maya Angelou or Oprah Winfrey or whomever it might be, we often hear the sort of rags to riches story, right? We hear the I was sleeping in my car and homeless, and then I'm a billionaire, right? We're these incredible, and these stories are very, very inspiring. But what has come up for me so many times is what happens. Like, I wanted more of a roadmap. I wanted more detail in between the sleeping on the park bench or in the car and being, having your own island as a billionaire, right? Like those are really extreme. And what we hear a lot is about the summit, right? Someone's got 18 New York Times bestsellers, 8 billion Instagram followers, and they're a household name and these awesome things. And it's so exciting, but we don't really know an, as much detail as I've always wanted of what happens in between those points, and even to specific milestones, because you don't go from sleeping in the car to the owning your island. It's not personally one of my visions, but we hear, those things. Whatever it might be, having the multi-million-dollar foundation, having the series of New York Times bestselling books, and whatever your vision is, right? So what I want to do, this is going to have kind of a yin yang effect in this particular show, and in all of our episodes, we're going to be exploring both sides. We're going to be exploring, again, the inner world using neuroscience, quantum physics. We're going to be exploring what it takes to rise internally into that next level and that identity. And we're going to really break down. I'm hoping to have some of these awesome people on the show, and I'm going to case study some of these thought leaders that we know and love, and maybe some you haven't heard of yet. And we're going to look at like one point to one point. We maybe it's how someone created their first six-figure year as a thought leader, as an author and speaker, or how someone got on, TEDx for the first time, or whatever it is, right? I will give you my playbooks, and we have one now for you too. If you just DM me on Instagram at Sarah Cannell, SARACONNELL. I will give you the Rise roadmap that we've already created. That's your workbook that accompanies this podcast. I'm a huge believer at Thought Leader Academy and in my coaching of empowering leaders to not only create inspirational content, whether it's a course, a program, a book, a talk, but to create transformational content. And so this podcast isn't just about listening. I hope you will enjoy immensely listening. I will do everything I can to make it entertaining and engaging and unique and provocative, and most importantly, empowering. And this is a podcast where we're going to do things, right? The internal and the external rise. So we have this workbook for you. It's completely free. It's my gift to you. And just message RISE either in the comments here, if you're watching it on YouTube, DM me on Instagram at Sarah Cannell, SARACONNELL, and we'll send you the roadmap that has the workbook that will help you go through this whole series and continue on with the show. All right. This journey is about you. And I will share my story because I faced a lot of things that I hope will be easier and you'll get through a lot faster than I did. But most importantly, it's about your rise. So something that could be exciting is even to pause right now, just pause the recording and take a breath and think about what is, if you were going to define your next level in the coming year, what is it that represents you having achieved and experienced and manifested that rise? So just pause there, because I think that's going to be really important for our conversation today and through the rest of this series and the show, that you just give yourself the gift of the moment. You might already be very, very clear. Like, I've been visioning, I've been vision boarding, I know exactly what I want and where I'm going. And if you have that, then let's go. Otherwise, pause and just free write, journal, take a few breaths, take a walk, and see what does that look like for you, so that we can pull in everything we're doing here in service of you hitting it. All right. Amazing. So now what I want to talk about is we've set some context that the rise is internal and external, but that's very theoretical at this point. I want to dig into what that actually means to me, and you can try this on. So I want to talk, I'm going to share a little bit about, I promised on this show, we're not going to do just, I was, broke and, in therapy, and now I have millions of dollars, right? We're going to drill it down and take point to point so that we, here's the other context that I really want to get to. Oftentimes, because we hear so much about someone's summit, their amazing, peak performance moment, their stratospheric fame that they've achieved, what happens is that we, as I said, we don't know enough of the steps in between. And also we end up modeling ourselves with someone's summit versus their rise, because we don't have access enough to what happened on the rise. So for example, we might hear of someone we admire with all these incredible books and shows and Netflix documentaries, and we hear they have a 3-hour morning routine, and they do a 4-hour work week, and but the thing is that they weren't doing that necessarily. Maybe they were, but they weren't necessarily doing that when when they were rising. That's what they do at the summit. And so I want to caution, I've had clients come to me and say, well, Brene Brown doesn't do a registration page for her webinar, or she doesn't, make an invitation to right. Well, she doesn't have to, right? But Brene Brown, who we will case study on this podcast, Brene Brown was told that her idea about a book on shame and vulnerability was basically stupid, from the stories I've heard. And so she printed the books herself and sold them out of the back of her car, right? We're going to do a much more in-depth, we'll do a Brene Brown case study because she's so wonderful. I adore her. Lots of you do too. But we just see, Brene Brown doesn't need to, do any of that type of market. Well, she doesn't now, because everyone knows her name. She's known by one word, Brene, like Prince, Madonna, right? Oprah. But that's not but that wasn't true at the beginning. Okay. So now we've got our context. The rise is inner, the rise is external, and that we want to model ourselves. If we have a goal, whatever that, when you closed your eyes or paused the recording and said, what I'm going for this year, what I feel called to, what I believe is my, when I'm really advocating for myself, my destiny, my divine destiny, we want to model ourselves on the rise versus someone's summit so that we can get there in a really joyful way, in a way that's going to impact people, that's going to create our own roadmap, right? And we're going to break it down into milestones as much as we can. All right. So the rise I want to talk about today is the rise for me of aspiring author to published best-selling author. And even that could be broken down into micro pieces, but I would just want to talk about that particular rise to give us an idea of how we're going to journey in this podcast when we look at the external. And I will share what it took internally as well. So I wanted to be a writer since I was little. I think my grandmother bought me my first journal, which is actually over in those drawers over there. I burned most of my journals, but I have the one from when I was 5 years old, and I wrote poetry and did sketches, and they were rhyming little kid poems. But what I remember is something electrifying happening when that book with blank pages. I loved to read. I still love to read. I read a book a week at least. But that blank book, it had a hardcover, it was brown, and I'll put a picture with the show notes if you find it. And I didn't like pencil. I wanted pen. I wanted something, I don't know, I just like pen. And I remember kind of probably using my hand like this, if you're watching YouTube, and writing. And there was something so electrifying, so exciting, so galvanizing about that experience, this alchemy from a blank page to something being on it that I got to think of in my imagination and write on the page. So I wrote in this journal, and I've journaled ever since. Actually, I've never stopped. And what what I know is I loved it. My school in fourth grade had this incredible thing. I wish every school did this, where you could write a book and they would publish your book and put it in the library with a library card. Yes, I'm old enough when we had library cards, like little slips in the back when I was a little kid. And so I got to have my book, and you could check out your friends' books, you could check out your own book. It was absolutely thrilling. If you said, what do you remember about elementary school? Top 3 moments, that's one of my top 3. Might be my number 1. So I had this excitement, this creativity that I just loved. And long story short, I got the message along the way. AP English, I had this famous English teacher, and I thought that was going to be the time when the thing happened, right? The thing was, a teacher was supposed to take you aside and tell you were special and that you were going to be a writer, because that's what happened in all the books and movies that I saw about young people who became writers. And when that didn't happen for me, when that teacher didn't single me out and tell me I was destined to be a writer and sort of do the knighting ceremony, I had this horrible kind of moment inside when I said, oh, I'm not good enough. And I didn't know that I was giving this one person who had never asked to be entrusted with my future or my destiny the power to decide if I was worthy of my dream. And I decided no, based on these context clues. And I went to college and read other people's work and was an English major. And then I went and worked in advertising and did it sort of shadow creative work. And all this to say that I just gave up on my dream. I gave up on myself that right then and there. And so the inner rise that had to happen was to reclaim that dream and that identity, because it wouldn't go. I mean, I would just say, no, it's off the table. I have to do other stuff, but it just wouldn't leave me alone. And I'm sure that your vision that you just took that moment and felt into is probably similar. It's either something new that's just, burst forth as an inspiration, or it's something maybe like mine was, that was there for so long, kind of tugging at the edges of your soul and saying, this is part of who you're here to be. But then we have, again, the inner rise that had to happen was that I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. It was very clear. The teacher would have told me, someone would have given me permission. I was waiting for someone to give me permission. And are you doing that? Like, I just wonder, or is there something you haven't even let yourself say that you want because you'd already told yourself it's off the table, like I did? Okay. So the inner rise that had to happen was to reclaim the identity of writer. And the cool thing about the rise is that we can come at it from either direction. We can think our way, we can do inner work to forge the new identity or reclaim the original identity. And we can start acting from that place. In this case, for me, it would have been writer. Or the cool part is we can start taking action as if we believed we were worthy, capable, supported, had permission, and then the identity will catch up. So the fun part is if you're more of an action person, you can enter into your rise with action. If you're a mindset person and an inner person, you can enter that way. They'll both work because they're both needed. We got to do both sides, right? So in this case, I didn't believe it all, right? I had already decided the world had declared not worthy. And so it was starting to create a depression in me to just not even try. And so what happened is I finally just, something broke and I thought, I probably will fail. I'm probably not good enough, right? The inner part of the rise was not there. But I I can't breathe properly when I don't do this thing. And I'm just going to do it. And so what? So what if I suck? So what if no one ever reads it? So, I mean, at that point, I was really facing like a depression. And I do think that when we don't do what we came here to do, we don't act on the inner impulse, we don't act on the big magic within us, that it can create health stuff, it can create mental health stuff. It can, I believe that, right? We're going to explore that in this show with the neuroscience and the quantum work. So I started my rise in that way, just finally by surrendering and saying, I'm just going to do it, even if I suck. And even if I fail, like I'm just going to start writing. And I finally, worked my way up to take some classes. And and the writing wasn't good because I'd never allowed myself to pursue it. How could it be great, right? I'd never allowed myself to read books about writing and study the craft of writing and do my reps. And so, I had a very fixed mindset, if you know that Carol Dweck work, right? So so what happened is I just started putting words on the page. And then when that didn't work and I found myself so anxious that I couldn't put words on the page, I decided to do what I've now come to call productive procrastination. Okay, productive procrastination. So what this looks like is when you avoid the thing that is the thing that is going to move you forward, that is your vision, but you do something that's in service of it, sort of adjacent. I don't recommend doing this for long periods of time, but what happened is I I read about and listened to interviews about 100 authors that I loved, 100 authors who had created works that had touched my life deeply. And I decided that I was going to just find out what they all did in common. Like there were outliers, right? People who never slept or they only ate, white food or random things. But what did they all do? What did they all do? And they did three things. This is what I found. They did three very clear things. The first thing that all of them did is that they actually sat down and wrote every day, or some version of a consistent writing practice. Okay. It wasn't doing that. It was not consistent. Number two, they all worked with some kind of editor, mentor, teacher. They had some kind of a mentor working with them. I was doing it on my own, right? And the third thing that they all did is they had some kind of writing community, even though we think of writing as very hermetic and very isolated and very room of one's own and in the cabin in the woods. And all of that is true. You're putting words on the page, but these writers that I loved had friends who were writers. They were connected. And so I knew that my rise was going to include me coming out of isolation. This was shocking to me. Okay. It shouldn't have been, but I knew that, painters in the last generation were together and they were doing salons, but I didn't think about writers being in so much community and having so much mentorship. It was a revelation. Maybe that's like a ridiculous one, but it was. And that felt terrifying. I didn't want anyone to see my work. I didn't want to see how bad it was. I didn't want anyone to know I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't want anyone to know I was trying. And then if I never got published, then they would know. It was all this stuff. But I was really clear that if I kept doing what I was doing, I was never going to fulfill this dream. I was never going to. And what made it even more important to me and what pushed me over the edge, and maybe you have a moment like this, was that when I was working at that advertising job, which unfortunately was in the middle of the Me Too era, And it was abusive and it was scary and it was traumatizing. And I felt like I was going to die if I kept putting myself in that situation. I found a book, and many of you know this story, by Margaret Bullitt Jonas, called Holy Hunger. I found a book, and I credit that book as saving my life. And the book was simply one woman who's not famous. It wasn't, you know, Maya Angelou. It wasn't Toni Morrison. It wasn't Elizabeth Gilbert. It was a woman who felt a calling in herself to share her story, to share her insights, to share her view of the world. And she shared about trauma that she'd experienced and disordered eating, which I got into, and how she got out. And by the time I finished reading the book, I knew that I was leaving that job and that I was going to pay that gift forward. I made it my mission. I was like, so it wasn't an option for me not to bring forth something, because that woman, thank you, Margaret Bullitt Jonas, had all the same, fears and gremlins, and it's too late and I'm too old and there's not time. I don't know what I'm doing and I don't have the money, and all the same stuff that I've had, that she had, that everyone I've coached in the last 20 years has had. And she wrote that book anyway. And I knew because her book was in that airport bookstore when I needed it, that I was going to make sure that my book was in the library or the bookstore or on Amazon or whatever it would be when someone needed it. And that decision, that commitment, it dragged me over the line of not wanting to make a consistent writing practice, let someone see my work and get some feedback, and starting to find other people who were doing what I wanted to do. And the crazy part is, the resistance, right? The resistance to the rise of doing the thing that we are here to do, that we are capable of and worthy of, and the universe is like cheering us on, right? It has exploded every good thing in my life. That decision to stick with it no matter what, even though I thought I would fail, did lead eventually, not overnight, right? But it eventually led to me taking some classes and networking and meeting someone who knew a literary agent. And then that literary agent did not sign me right away, but had me work on my writing for months. But when she did say yes, that led to the first book deal. It led to being on Oprah. It led to being published in the New York Times, and all of these things that were the rise, right? From dreaming, that little 5-year-old writing in the journal, to having a published book and having visibility and getting to contribute and getting to be what Holy Hunger was for me. It only could happen because of starting the rise. And for me, that looked like starting to write basically every day, signing up for a class, eventually having a writing coach, and starting to create a community. And what's crazy is the joy, the level of joy and fun. Like, who wants to do this on their own, right? So I wanted to break down the rise. If you have a book in you, right? If 2024 is the year of your first or next book, then think about those three things. What's it gonna take to do your consistent writing practice? Who do you want your mentor to be, and where's the community? And again, just message, if you don't know, DM me or put in the comments here the word RISE, RISE, and we'll make sure to get you into our next boot camp, the Bestselling Book Boot Camp, where I teach everything that took me 10 years to do to make that rise, and our clients can do in a matter of months. So, and it's free. Okay, that's my gift, because I'm paying that gift forward that writer did for me in that airport 20 something years ago. All right. I want to finish with one more piece about the rise from aspiring writer to published author, right? I said it really comes down to putting into action on the external 3 key things: starting to get words on the page. Again, come to the boot camp. If you don't want to do that by yourself and don't know how to get yourself to write, I will help you. I have been there. I spent 2 decades resisting putting words on the page. And I got a lot of tricks and a lot of moves, right? Get you there. So mentorship, that's there, and your community. So one of the first clients I worked with, after I had this experience of breaking through finally and being able to have the book come out and have the agent and have the book deal and all the things. And at that point, I added to my vow, not just paying it forward with my own books, but that I would make sure that others who had the same dream, others who knew that they had that book in them, and they had a bigger message, you need to reach more people, that I would make sure to do everything in my power to make sure that they fulfilled that vision. And of course, I've been now, doing that for 15 years and more as a coach and in Thought Leader Academy. So I want to talk about the very first person that I worked with. I won't say her name here just for her privacy's sake, but she'd been a lawyer for a number of years and probably was as miserable as I was at the advertising agency in her law job. She was facing, different challenges and struggles, but let's just say she hated it. Okay. I think that's very accurate, and words that she had used. She hated it. And she deeply, deeply, and had for her whole life as well, wanted to be a writer, but again, thought you can't make money. I'm not good enough. She had all the, what we call the gremlins. And why I want to share her story in this moment is because I entered my rise to published author from aspiring author through action. And she entered through the inner world. Okay. So again, you can come at it either way. They'll both work because we're going to do both no matter what. And so she came to my house one day when I was seeing people in person, and she came over and she said, it's just not going to work. I can't get myself to do it. I've hired you. And I'm here, and it's just, I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting my money. I'm wasting your time. Like, it's not going to happen because I just don't believe in myself. I just don't. And I shared with you, don't have to, right? Like we can take action as if we believed and do the act as if thing. And I kind of shared my story, and she's like, yeah, no, right. This is why I love the rise. Can happen internally or externally. The start of it can go either way. And I said, okay, so instead of your homework being writing, how about I drew a fake line, like as if I had sand in my living room. I took my toe across the floorboards of my hardwood floor. And I said, come stand with me here. And we stood on the backside of this imaginary line. And I said, when we cross over, you are a writer. You're a writer. That's what you are. That's who you are. It's what you are. It's what you do. And we're going to walk or jump or leap across this line together. Will you do that with me? And she said, this is so dumb. And it is goofy, right? I said, just humor me. 1, 2, 3. And I jumped across the line. She went like across the line, kind of shoulders slumped, like, oh, whatever. And she said, well, I don't feel different at all. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. And I said, so all I'm going to ask you to do is tell 20 people between now and when we meet next week the phrase, I am a writer. People say, if you're at the grocery store, it says, what do you do? I'm a writer. Even if they don't ask you what you do. Hey, did you know I'm a writer? And she said, absolutely not. She's like, you're nuts. You're nuts. You're bonkers. And I said, yeah, I might be. But this is, I'm not even asking you to write this week. I'm just asking you to tell 20 people. They can be strangers and people you'll never see again if that feels safer. But you're going to say out loud 20 times this week in front of another human being, I am a writer. And she just closed her arms over her chest. Fine, whatever. And she did it. That's the amazing thing. Okay. She did it. And this is the inner work of her claiming identity. And she went out and she said, it was so embarrassing. And she was texting me every time, every one of the 20 times. I did one more. It was awful. I did one more. I felt like an idiot because everyone then asked, oh, what have you written? And people often conflate in the rise from aspiring author to best-selling author, the difference between writer and published author, right? A writer, if you look in the dictionary, is one who writes. That's what the definition of a writer is. So this beautiful woman, this talented woman who I absolutely know had it in her to be a wonderful, incredible, impactful best-selling author, told 20 people that week, instead of I'm a lawyer, I'm a writer. And then her commitment was that if anyone ever asked, she didn't have to volunteer it, but if anyone asked from that point forward, she would just say, I'm a writer. And they'd say, what are you? And I'd say, how do I answer when they ask, what books have I written? Say, oh, I'm working on an upcoming book called, titled her book. Within 3 months, she had a book deal. That book became a bestseller. And she went on to do another bestseller and made writing her vocation. Okay, this can sound like, oh, a fairy tale. It wasn't easy, right? And she still had to figure out financially as she grew her book sales and speaking and other things, how to make it all work. But she started with the identity. She entered her rise by saying, I am a writer. And so what I want to end with today is for you to create a statement out of whatever that thing is that you closed your eyes at the beginning of the episode and said, this is what I'm calling in. This is what I'm called to this year. And I want you to put an I am in front of it, make it an I am statement. And yeah, I'm going to invite you to tell 20 people this week. I'm a 7-figure CEO. I am the founder of globally positive impacting philanthropy. I am a best-selling author. I am a powerful transformational thought leader. That's your homework. And then you can work on the workbook. That's just Rise. Remember to get your workbook so you can do everything along with this series. I'm really excited to take this journey with you. And to recap what we've done today, right? Really establishing what is the Rise. If this show is called The Rise and it's helping you break through to your next level inside and out, then what does that mean? What it means is that we're going to build the identity to match the vision from the inside out. And we're going to take the actions of the person. We're going to break down what are those actions to go from where we are to that next level. And we're going to chunk it down a lot more than sleeping in the car to billionaire. And we're going to take those actions and we get to do it together. So I'm linking arms with you. I'm so excited. I'm so thrilled that you joined us for this very first episode. Please subscribe to the show. That will help us bring you those incredible thought leaders that we want to ask those questions and say, what was it? Yes, that's wonderful. You're a billionaire now, but what was it when you got started? Or what took you in the middle from this point to this point? And it will help us bring you the most incredible content absolutely free, because I want this to be, and it is now, and I want it to stay available to everyone and our gift to you. So please do subscribe to the show, and we're really excited to see you on the next episode.